The first impression of a northern Australian estuary is one of deceptive stillness. The water lies dark and tannin-stained beneath the mangroves, carrying a slow current that seems more like the breath of the tide than the motion of a river. Mudskippers cling to roots that arch like stilts out of the ooze, herons stalk the shallows, and mullet ripple in sudden bursts, scattering as if startled by some invisible hand. Yet this calm is a facade. Beneath the mirrored surface of the water waits a predator older than the estuary itself, one that has been shaping the habits of every animal that dares to drink, cross, or fish these banks. The saltwater crocodile, Crocodilus porosus, does not merely occupy the estuary, it defines its edges, enforcing an invisible order that few species dare to test. For the crocodile, this landscape is not a backdrop, but a vast and shifting trap. It reads the tides the way a hunter reads footprints. As water rises and falls, salinity gradients shift like invisible curtains, concentrating fish, crabs and turtles into narrow zones. A school of mullet ascending on a rising tide may be greeted by an ambush where fresh water meets salt. A wallaby creeping down for a drink at low tide will find itself standing on a narrowing strip of mud, hemmed in by cutbanks, too steep to climb quickly. Every change in water level sharpens the geometry of opportunity, and the crocodile has learned, over millions of years, to wait precisely where the tide will drive its quarry. Its adaptations are built for this role of gatekeeper. Along its broad, armored jaws lie rows of tiny black pits, integumentary sense organs that detect the faintest vibrations in water pressure. To the human eye, they appear as little more than pinpricks, but to the crocodile, they are an entire sensory map of the estuary. A mullet tail flicking half a river away, or the cautious step of a feral pig entering the shallows, sends ripples that the crocodile interprets as clearly as sound. Unlike most predators, which rely on eyesight or scent carried by air, the crocodile perceives its world through the pressure and rhythm of water itself. This sense allows it to hunt in darkness, beneath turbid floods, or in silence when the mangrove canopy hides both moon and star. The mechanics of the strike are brutal in their simplicity. Crocodiles rarely pursue. Pursuit wastes energy, and these reptiles are masters of economy. Instead, they sink below the surface, leaving only nostrils exposed, and wait. Hours may pass, the tide creeping outward, drawing thirsty animals closer to the water's edge. Then, in a movement so swift it seems to belong to a different animal, the crocodile erupts from the water. The target, whether fish, bird or mammal, is seized in jaws that can generate over 3,000 pounds of force, enough to crush bone or snap a turtle shell. What follows is not a clean kill, but a contest of suffocation and exhaustion. The crocodile drags its prey into the depths, where air is absent and panic magnifies mistakes. Only after death does feeding begin, often with a violent rotational maneuver known as the death roll, designed to tear flesh into swallowable portions. For humans, these mechanics translate into a geography of risk. Boat ramps, crossings, and low banks are not just convenient for us, they are the same predictable access points that crocodiles have learned to monitor. A fisherman leaning over to rinse his hands may unknowingly place himself within striking distance of a hunter that has been watching tides longer than civilizations have stood. These edge habitats, where land meets water in a steep drop or shallow incline, concentrate both prey and predator. What seems like an arbitrary patch of riverbank is, to a crocodile, an engineered ambush corridor sculpted by the movement of water and the complacency of creatures seeking it. Yet to frame the crocodile solely as a killer is to miss its deeper role in the estuarine system. It is a regulator, shaping the distribution of species across the floodplains. Without crocodiles, fish might linger too long in shallow creeks, overgrazing algae or stripping insect populations. Wallabies and feral pigs might trample banks unchecked, eroding the very structure of the mangroves. Even birds learn the silent rules enforced by this reptile. Egrets stand taller, more vigilant, their patience sharpened by the awareness that hesitation near the waterline can mean death. In this way, the crocodile becomes not just an apex predator, but an architect of caution, teaching restraint through fear and maintaining balance through selective predation. Crocodiles themselves walk a careful line of survival. Though armored in scales as hard as keratin plates and capable of withstanding wounds that would fell most mammals, they are not invulnerable. Hatchlings emerge at scarcely more than 20 centimeters long, chirping within their nests to summon the mother who will ferry them in her mouth to the water. At this size, they are vulnerable to everything from raptors to barramundi, and survival rates are low. Those that endure grow with astonishing speed in their first years, their metabolism a furnace fueled by every opportunity seized. By the time a male reaches 5 meters in length, it has outlived nearly every threat except rivals of its own kind and the occasional human armed with tools. Territoriality defines much of crocodile society. Males stake claims over stretches of river and estuary, patrolling boundaries with displays of bellows, jaw slaps, and water-churning rolls. These sounds are not merely threats, but acoustic messages, resonating through both air and water to announce dominance. Females, smaller but equally formidable, select nesting sites on high ground above the wet season floodline, scraping together mounds of vegetation whose decomposition generates heat to incubate eggs. The balance of temperature within the nest determines the sex of the hatchlings, a delicate thermoregulatory strategy where a few degrees can skew entire generations. In hotter years, more males are born. In cooler years, more females. Climate change, with its creeping rise in average temperature, may thus tilt the scales of reproduction in ways unseen over the past millennia. The crocodile's ability to thrive in both fresh and salt water extends its reach beyond the estuary itself. Individuals have been tracked traveling hundreds of kilometers along coastlines, riding ocean currents to colonize new river systems. They are navigators as much as ambush hunters, using their acute sense of geomagnetic orientation to return to home ranges even after displacement by cyclones. This capacity for movement explains why crocodiles appear suddenly in unexpected places, a billabong deep inland, a floodplain pond after the wet season. They are not confined to estuaries. They are sculptors of connectivity, linking ecosystems through their wanderings. From an evolutionary perspective, the crocodile is a survivor, not because it has resisted change, but because it has embodied adaptability cloaked in patience. Its lineage stretches back over 200 million years, predating flowering plants, birds, and mammals. During that time, it has endured extinctions that erased the giants of the Mesozoic, shifting its form only subtly while perfecting the art of waiting. Thermoregulation, for example, is achieved not through constant metabolic heat, but through behavior, basking on mudbanks to absorb morning sun, submerging during the heat of midday, retreating into shade when necessary. In this way, it saves energy, avoiding the metabolic demands that limit the size of warm-blooded predators. Its sheer scale, 6 meters or more in the largest males, is made possible by this cold-blooded thrift, an economy that turns patience into power. Perhaps the most humbling realization when watching a crocodile is that it sees time differently. For a mammal, hunger compels action within hours or days. For a crocodile, fasting for months is not uncommon. An individual can wait out wet season floods or dry season scarcity, conserving energy until the river itself delivers prey to the right place. In this sense, the estuary is not merely its hunting ground, but its ally, a dynamic system that feeds the crocodile's strategy of compression and release. Tides rise, prey gathers, water falls, and the trap is sprung over and over, a cycle as old as the species itself. The irony, of course, is that humans, with all our awareness, often misjudge the estuary more than any kangaroo, heron, or fish. We mistake silence for safety, convenience for neutrality. We launch boats from the very ramps where crocodiles linger, fish the crossings where prey herds converge, and drink from banks where the mud tells stories of countless ambushes. To the crocodile, these are not coincidences but certainties, woven into the fabric of survival. It does not hate us, nor does it hunt us with preference. We are simply one more species drawn to the edge, one more body leaning into the water at the wrong moment. The saltwater crocodile endures as the estuary's gatekeeper because it has mastered the art of inevitability. It does not chase, it waits. It does not gamble, it calculates. By harnessing tides, salinity, and geometry, it turns chance into design. In doing so, it not only preserves its own lineage, but also shapes the very structure of life along Australia's northern waterways. To enter these estuaries is to step into a system already claimed, already mapped by senses beyond our own. Here, survival belongs to those who recognize the rules, and the crocodile is the one who wrote them. At first light, the ocean wears its most deceptive mask. The surface shimmers gold beneath a rising sun, gentle swells folding and unfolding like a breathing skin. To the eye of a beachgoer, the scene is calm, almost serene, but beneath those undulating ridges lies a battlefield of light and shadow. Here, where sandbars break and gutters carve darker channels across the pale seabed, the rules of life are written in contrast. The great white shark, Carcharodon carcharius, presides over this court of moving water, passing judgment not with malice, but with the ancient instinct of survival. The geography of the surf zone is critical to its function as hunting ground. Waves collapsing over a sandbar create turbulence, churning sediment into the water and sharpening the difference between bright, shallow ridges and the darker drop-offs that flank them. These gutters are highways for fish schools, safe passageways for seals, and inevitably, gauntlets where predators wait. From below, prey crossing the bars appears silhouetted against the glare of the surface, blackened outlines shifting like shadows on a screen. It is here, in this theater of silhouettes, that the great white is most dangerous. Sharks perceive the world in layers of information invisible to us. Along their flanks runs the lateral line system, a series of fluid-filled canals dotted with hair-like receptors. This organ detects the smallest vibrations and pressure changes, allowing a shark to sense the direction and density of a moving school of fish, or the frantic thrash of a wounded seal even in murky surf. Coupled with this is the ampullae of Lorenzini, electroreceptive pores around the snout that can detect the faint bioelectric fields produced by muscle contractions. To a shark, the ocean is a three-dimensional field of invisible signals, every heartbeat and flicker of movement mapped against the shifting backdrop of current and tide. Yet sight still matters, particularly in shallow coastal zones where silhouettes betray what vibration alone cannot. From beneath a sandbar, the shark glances upward and sees not detail but outline. A seal crossing against a rising sun becomes a stark shadow, crisp and enticing. A lone swimmer at dawn, legs kicking against a pale seabed, produces a similar contrast. It is here that confusion can arise, for the shark is not misled by choice, but by physics. Against the glare of a low-angle sun and the clouding of surf-tossed sediment, silhouettes compress into generalities. The shark does not yet know prey from non-prey. It investigates the way it has for millions of years, with its teeth. The so-called investigative bite is both a marvel of evolution and a reminder of its indifference to human expectation. Unlike a cat's tentative paw or a bird's probing beak, a shark's test is violent by necessity. Its jaw is its instrument of inquiry, capable of extending forward on muscular ligaments and shearing with serrated teeth designed to carve through blubber. The initial strike may not always be intended to kill outright, but to gather information, density, fat content, the very composition of the body before it. To seals, this is usually fatal. To humans, it is often survivable, though catastrophic. In either case, the process underscores the shark's role not as a reckless attacker, but as a judge, weighing silhouettes against evolutionary expectations in a world of fleeting chances. The rhythm of these encounters is tied to time itself. Dawn and dusk are not coincidental danger zones, but windows when light contrast is at its sharpest. Seals moving to and from colonies often use these hours for foraging, and baitfish boil in tight schools driven toward shore by larger predators. The shark learns to synchronize its patrols with these rhythms, circling offshore in broad arcs before moving into the channels as the horizon shifts from black to grey or from orange to night. This pattern is as reliable as tide and moon, etched into behavior through countless generations of successful hunts. But the great white is not confined to these nearshore ambushes. It is a creature of vast migrations, tracing lines invisible to us, but as precise as the routes of seabirds. Satellite tagging has revealed journeys spanning thousands of kilometers, linking seal colonies of South Africa to offshore feeding grounds, or Australia's temperate coasts to the open expanses of the Coral Sea. These migrations are not random wanderings, but cycles of energy acquisition and reproduction. A shark may gorge on seals in one season, building the fat reserves that will sustain it across barren stretches of ocean, then navigate back with unerring accuracy to the same sandbar where it learned to hunt as a juvenile. The physiological engine behind this is remarkable. Unlike most fish, the great white is partially warm-blooded, an endothermic predator in an ectothermic world. Muscles generate heat that is retained by a network of blood vessels called the rete mirabile, a countercurrent exchange system that keeps critical organs and swimming muscles warmer than the surrounding water. This adaptation grants bursts of speed and endurance unknown to most other sharks, allowing it to launch from depth to surface in a vertical sprint that seals rarely survive. In effect, it is an evolutionary compromise, conserving the metabolic thrift of cold-blooded fishes while borrowing some of the athletic edge of mammals. Predation here is not just about the moment of attack, but the regulation of ecosystems. By culling the weak and unwary among seal populations, great whites prevent overgrazing of fish stocks and maintain the health of marine mammal herds. Their presence also alters behavior in profound ways. Seals move differently when sharks patrol, hugging rocks, darting between kelp and hauling out more frequently. These shifts cascade downward, influencing how fish schools disperse, how seabirds forage, even how nutrients flow across the surf zone. The shark is thus not merely a consumer, but a shaper of patterns, a force that dictates where and when other animals dare to move. Humans, too, are drawn into this web of influence. Surfers, swimmers and divers enter the same habitats during the same windows of contrast, often unaware that the geometry of water and light places them squarely in the silhouette zone. The advice to avoid dawn and dusk swimming is not superstition but science. The very conditions that sharpen a shark's hunting efficiency, low light, turbidity and schooling prey, also increase the odds of a mistaken bite. Similarly, the warning to avoid high-contrast wetsuits or bright gear stems from the same principle. Contrast kills. It is the visual trigger that completes the shark's sensory equation, leading investigation into strike. Yet to frame the great white only in terms of danger is to flatten a far richer story. These sharks are also surprisingly cautious, selective predators. Not every silhouette results in a strike, and many encounters end with nothing more than a slow pass, the shark circling, sampling the chemical cues in the water, measuring the vibration signature. They do not hunt indiscriminately, but evaluate, weighing risk against reward. For a large shark, even a seal can inflict dangerous injuries if engaged without precision. The surf zone, chaotic with waves and rocks, is a risky courtroom, and the shark's judgment is shaped by caution as much as hunger. Reproduction adds another layer of complexity. Great whites are ovoviviparous, with embryos developing inside the mother and feeding initially on yolk before consuming unfertilized eggs in a phenomenon known as oophagy. This investment in fewer, well-developed young means population recovery is slow. Females may only reproduce once every 2 or 3 years, producing a handful of pups. Conservationists emphasize this point because the removal of even a few mature individuals can ripple through populations. The very traits that make the great white a dominant predator, long lifespan, slow maturation, high energetic demand, also render it vulnerable to decline. Seen from this perspective, the great white shark is less a monster than a finely tuned arbiter of ecological balance. Its judgments, made through strikes and near misses, shape the health of coastal ecosystems from fish schools to seal rookeries. Its migrations knit together disparate marine habitats, carrying nutrients across ocean basins. Its very presence enforces vigilance among prey, maintaining the fitness of species that must outthink, outmaneuver, or outweight it. And for us, it is a living reminder that wild oceans remain ruled not by convenience or recreation, but by laws older and less negotiable than our own. To watch the surf break over a sandbar is to see a courtroom where predator and prey meet under strict natural law. The light shifts, silhouettes form, and judgments are passed in seconds. Some leave the gutter alive, others do not. The shark's role is not cruel but necessary, not random but inevitable. It is the sandbar judge presiding over a trial conducted in currents, silhouettes, and contrast. For those who enter its realm, the rule is simple and unyielding: know how the court is held, or risk becoming its next verdict. The Australian desert does not end abruptly. It frays outward, dissolving into belts of spinifex grassland, saltbush flats, and narrow corridors of acacia scrub, where the dry heart of the continent meets its more forgiving margins. These edges are not wilderness in the untouched sense. They are crossed with roads, scarred by old fence lines, and punctuated by stock dams and windmills that draw both cattle and kangaroos. To the untrained eye, it is a stark and empty frontier. To the dingo, it is a map of lines, paths etched by humans, prey, and geology alike. And those lines are the routes along which survival plays out. The dingo, Canis dingo, is not the largest predator in this land, nor the most numerous, but it is the one that has learned best to walk the margins. Its form carries the hallmarks of its ancestry, descended from Asian dogs introduced thousands of years ago, lean and angular, a body pared down for endurance. Its legs are long, its chest narrow, its coat a variable wash of sand, rust or pale cream that blends with the dust. Unlike domestic dogs, dingoes lack the insulating underfur of northern breeds, an adaptation that sheds heat during long-distance pursuits across open country. Thermoregulation here is as much behavioral as physiological. Dingoes move mostly at night or in the cool hours of dawn, conserving water, letting the desert sun do its worst while they rest in shallow scrapes or shaded gullies. At night, the desert changes. Kangaroos emerge from their daytime cover, grazing along the ecotone fringes where open flats meet denser scrub. Wallabies pick cautiously at the grass shoots near the cover of mulga, their ears swiveling constantly for the faintest sound. It is along these same grazing lines that dingoes prowl, weaving silently between tufts of spinifex, pausing to test the air, then resuming their patient circuit. They do not simply wander at random. Packs learn the patterns of their prey and patrol accordingly, favoring the edges where animals must step out to feed. These lines, the ecotones, become natural funnels, corridors of risk that the dingoes exploit with the practiced efficiency of generations. But it is not only natural lines that guide them. Human-made features serve as highways too. Vehicle tracks, station fence lines, even the colossal dingo fence itself, a barrier stretching thousands of kilometers across Queensland, New South Wales, and South Australia, all become conduits for movement. Dingoes patrol these straight edges not because they understand their human purpose, but because such features simplify travel. A dirt road is easier to pad along than tussocks of grass. A fence line offers clear sight of both sides, a convenient corridor for scent marking and scouting. Even the fence that was built to exclude them has become a behavioral landmark. Dingoes walk its shadow, testing for weaknesses, knowing instinctively that prey densities often differ sharply from one side to the other. On the inside, kangaroos graze more heavily in the absence of top predators. On the outside, livestock are more closely guarded. The dingo's trail becomes the literal seam of Australia's ecological divide. Communication underpins this life along the line. Dingoes are not solitary drifters but pack animals, bound together through vocal beacons that echo across the night. Their howls, rising, wavering, often layered as multiple pack members join, are not random cries but precise declarations of territory. A howl can carry for kilometers, a sonic fence more flexible and enduring than any strand of wire. Through howling, packs coordinate hunts, signal location to stragglers, and warn rivals to keep distance. The desert at night is a patchwork of these acoustic borders, overlapping at the margins, shifting with the fortunes of prey and season. Hunting is not always dramatic chase, but strategic endurance. Dingoes are cursorial predators, built to cover distance rather than explode with speed. A pack may pursue a kangaroo not by sprint, but by relentless pressure, taking turns to harry and flank, forcing the quarry into open ground where exhaustion tips the balance. Smaller prey, rabbits, lizards, rodents, provide sustenance when larger hunts fail, but it is the medium to large herbivores that define the rhythm of survival. Kangaroos, especially the red kangaroo that dominates inland grasslands, are both challenge and prize. By shaping kangaroo behavior, dingoes indirectly shape the land itself. Overgrazing is checked, plant communities recover, waterholes are spared from trampling excess. In this way, the predator becomes a gardener of the desert rim, its influence stretching beyond the immediate kill. Perhaps most profound is the dingo's role in suppressing mesopredators. Foxes and feral cats, both introduced, thrive in the absence of competition. Left unchecked, they decimate ground-nesting birds, small marsupials and reptiles, emptying ecosystems of biodiversity. Where dingoes are present, however, these mesopredators are held at bay. Direct aggression plays a role. Dingoes will kill foxes and cats they encounter, but so does intimidation. The scent of dingo urine, the sound of a howl, even the presence of tracks is enough to deter smaller predators from moving freely. Ecologists call this the landscape of fear, and its effect ripples outward. Bandicoots forage more confidently, bilbies persist where otherwise they might vanish, and the fragile balance of desert ecosystems is held together by the unseen authority of the dingo. Ironically, it is along the very human lines intended to control them that this authority is most visible. The dingo fence, conceived as protection for sheep and cattle, has divided more than just pastoral land. On its predator-free side, herbivore populations often swell, stripping vegetation, eroding soils, and altering plant communities. On the dingo side, ecosystems remain more intact, the trophic cascade anchored by the presence of a top carnivore. From space, the contrast can even be seen in satellite imagery. Greener vegetation where dingoes roam, barer ground where they do not. In this sense, the fence has become an unintended experiment, a continental-scale proof of the ecological role of an apex predator. The dingo's adaptability also extends to its interactions with humans. Around pastoral stations, they scavenge at refuse heaps, trail stock routes, and test the boundaries of enclosures. Some individuals display remarkable boldness, approaching camps or following vehicles, their amber eyes betraying neither fear nor subservience. Others remain ghosts, seldom seen, leaving only paw prints at waterholes. This duality reflects the species' complex position, reviled by some as stock killers, valued by others as guardians of ecological balance, and increasingly studied as living models of semi-domestication suspended between wild and tame. Unlike wolves, which evolved into dogs under full human partnership, dingoes remain at the threshold, social, intelligent, adaptable, yet resistant to complete control. Reproduction follows a seasonal rhythm tightly bound to the desert's pulse. Mating occurs once a year, and only dominant pairs typically breed within a pack. Gestation lasts about 9 weeks, with pups born in sheltered dens, rock crevices, hollow logs, or even old rabbit burrows. Cooperative care is the rule. Not only the mother, but other pack members regurgitate food for the pups, defend the den, and teach the young to hunt. Mortality is high, but those that survive learn the geometry of their world quickly, the edges where prey grazes, the lines of road and fence, the sound of a howl marking territory. In this way, knowledge passes invisibly from one generation to the next, encoded not in genetics alone, but in the cultural inheritance of the pack. To watch a dingo trotting along a fence line under moonlight is to glimpse an animal perfectly attuned to edge existence. Its gait is effortless, ground covered with minimal waste, ears pivoting at every rustle in the grass. It pauses to scent mark a post, to listen for distant howls, then resumes its patrol. This is not aimless wandering, but systematic mapping, a nightly reaffirmation of presence. Each linear feature is both guide and opportunity, a track to follow, a corridor where prey hesitates, a boundary to test. The dingo is less a wanderer of open desert than a specialist of edges, a predator that turns the scars of human activity into tools of its own survival. In the broader picture, the dingo embodies the paradox of coexistence. It is both persecuted and protected, both wild and familiar, both destroyer of stock and savior of biodiversity. To some, it is a pest. To others, a cultural icon deeply woven into indigenous songlines and mythologies, where its howl is part of the continent's ancient rhythm. What unites all these perspectives is recognition of its persistence. Despite barriers of wire and campaigns of eradication, the dingo continues to walk the lines, shaping not only the fate of kangaroos and wallabies, but the very health of Australia's arid ecosystems. The desert rim is a place of boundaries, between wet and dry, wild and managed, predator and prey. The dingo thrives here because it understands those boundaries instinctively, exploiting them not as obstacles, but as opportunities. It is the fence walker, the line follower, the predator whose survival is written in edges. In following those lines, it teaches us that ecosystems themselves are often defined not by their centers but by their margins, and that the health of a landscape can hinge on the quiet patrol of a lean, amber-eyed hunter padding softly along the desert's rim. The edge of the desert is never uniform. Where flat red sands stretch outward in a seemingly endless sheet, there are always interruptions. Low stony ridges, clusters of boulders, or ancient outcrops that rise like islands from an ocean of dust. These stone fields are not barren obstacles but crucibles of survival, radiating heat by day and harboring shade by afternoon. At their bases lie pockets of cooler air, crevices where lizards retreat, burrows that open toward sandy flats, and carcasses that wind up snagged in cracks before decomposition. To the Perentie, Varanus giganteus, these places are both fortress and hunting ground. It moves between rock and sand with the authority of an enforcer, patrolling the seams where temperature shifts dictate opportunity. The Perentie is Australia's largest lizard, a monitor of formidable presence. Adults can exceed 2 meters in length, their bodies a mix of mottled cream and chocolate patterns that blend perfectly with the desert's stony canvas. They are muscular yet streamlined, tails thick at the base and tapering like whips, claws long and curved for climbing rock or digging out burrows. But the real power of the Perentie is not brute force alone. It is the precision with which it manages its energy in a land where heat can kill as swiftly as hunger. Heat budgeting defines its daily rhythm. Unlike mammals, which regulate body temperature internally, the Perentie must constantly negotiate with its environment. In the cool hours of dawn, it emerges from a rock hollow, sides pressed flat against stone that has stored the night's last trace of warmth. As the sun rises, it shifts deliberately, exposing more surface area to absorb heat, basking until muscle fibers loosen and metabolism climbs. By mid-morning, when the rocks themselves begin to burn, the Perentie slips into shade, tucking its body against cooler surfaces or beneath boulders where air circulates. This cycle of absorption and retreat allows it to operate within a narrow band of optimal performance, fueling bursts of explosive activity without succumbing to overheating. It is within these controlled windows that hunting takes place. Perenties are opportunists, and their strategies pivot between ambush and pursuit. From the concealment of a rock shadow, they watch the flats for movement, a rabbit emerging from a burrow, a smaller lizard basking too long in the open, or the careless hop of a ground-foraging bird. When the moment arrives, the Perentie launches forward with startling acceleration. For an animal that spends much of its day conserving energy, its sprint is astonishing, a muscular explosion of limbs and tail that can close short distances in seconds. The element of surprise is aided by the seam itself. Where sand meets stone, temperature differences create microhabitats, cooler shadows along the rocks, hotter exposed flats beyond. Prey species use these gradients too, moving between shade and sun as they regulate their own body heat. The Perentie understands this, timing its movements so that ambush coincides with the moments when prey has fewer options, when a rabbit lingers too long at a burrow entrance to cool itself, or when a lizard scuttles across sand that has already grown punishingly hot. In these zones of overlap, shadow becomes weapon. But not all meals come from the chase. Perenties are consummate scent trackers, equipped with long forked tongues that flick rhythmically to collect particles of air and soil. These are delivered to the Jacobson's organ in the roof of the mouth, where chemical signatures are decoded with remarkable accuracy. A Perentie can follow the faint odor of a rabbit down into a labyrinth of burrow entrances, testing each opening until it finds one still warm from recent passage. Smaller reptiles, too, leave trails that the monitor can interpret, leading to nests or retreats where eggs and hatchlings offer concentrated packages of nutrition. Scavenging plays an equally vital role. The desert is unforgiving, and carcasses, whether kangaroo, wallaby or livestock, are frequent fixtures on its margins. Left unchecked, they would accumulate, altering nutrient flows and attracting pest species. The Perentie ensures this does not happen. With claws capable of rending flesh and jaws that exert bone-cracking force, it tears into carrion with the efficiency of a cleanup crew. Bacteria and insects may do the final work, but the Perentie is the first responder, converting death back into usable energy for the ecosystem. In this way, it is both predator and janitor, enforcing a kind of balance between life and decay at the edge of the desert. Despite their size, Perenties are not reckless. They are wary, quick to retreat into crevices if threatened. Their primary defense is flight, aided by their intimate knowledge of the rocks that structure their territories. Yet when cornered, they are formidable. They can rear up on hind legs and tails, delivering whipping strikes powerful enough to bruise or break bone. Their bite, though not venomous in the traditional sense, carries bacteria and anticoagulants that can weaken prey over time. Some researchers suggest their saliva contains mild venom proteins, a trait shared with other monitor lizards, though its role is debated. Regardless, to the animals that encounter them, the Perentie is not a predator to be taken lightly. The ecological role of the Perentie extends beyond its immediate predatory reach. By raiding rabbit burrows, it helps check populations of one of Australia's most destructive invasive species. By scavenging, it reduces disease transmission and clears habitats for other species. Even its presence reshapes the behavior of smaller reptiles and mammals, which must balance foraging opportunities against the risk of ambush. This dynamic of fear, as much as actual predation, helps distribute prey pressure across the landscape, preventing overuse of any single patch of vegetation or microhabitat. Seasonal rhythms add further depth to its story. During cooler months, Perenties remain active but slower, basking longer to raise body temperature and hunting less frequently. In the blistering heights of summer, activity contracts into narrow windows of early morning and late afternoon, with midday spent almost entirely in retreat. Breeding occurs during the warmer part of the year, with females laying eggs in carefully chosen sites, often within termite mounds whose steady heat ensures incubation. This use of termite colonies as incubators is one of the Perentie's more remarkable strategies. outsourcing thermal regulation to another species' architecture. It is a reminder that survival in the desert is rarely solitary. It is built on interactions, exploitations, and interdependencies woven across species. Humans encounter perenties less often than dingoes or kangaroos, but sightings are memorable. A 2-meter lizard basking on a roadside boulder is a vision of raw prehistoric presence, a reminder that Australia's deserts hold lineages stretching back to the age of giants. To indigenous Australians, the perentia holds cultural significance, appearing in dreaming stories as both creator and enforcer, a being whose movements across rock and sand-shaped landscapes and established laws of behavior. These narratives align uncannily with the ecological truths that the perentia does indeed enforce, not through myth, but through predation, scavenging, and the quiet regulation of heat and shadow at the desert's edges. To watch one in its element is to see the embodiment of patience punctuated by violence. For long minutes it may appear lifeless, draped over a stone, eyes half-lidded. Then, with a flick of tongue and a shift of muscle, it transforms, alert, moving with intent, a hunter in pursuit of a trail invisible to us. It vanishes into scrub, reappears on a boulder, and then drops silently to raid a burrow. Its presence is measured not in constant motion, but in decisive interventions, each action calibrated by temperature, scent, and opportunity. The perentie survives because it has mastered the seam, the place where shadow meets sun, where rock yields to sand, where heat builds and dissipates in rhythms as sentient as the desert itself. It does not fight the extremes, but leverages them, turning microclimates into weapons, shadows into springs of opportunity. In doing so, it maintains a role larger than its solitary presence suggests, enforcing balance through both predation and cleanup. The desert rim has many guardians, the dingo pacing its fences, the kangaroo grazing its flats, the wedge-tailed eagle circling overhead. Among them, the perentia is the enforcer of the rock-sand edge, a reptilian sentinel whose authority derives not from dominance alone, but from an intimate understanding of temperature, time, and terrain. In the harsh arithmetic of the desert, its rule is clear. Survival is not won by resisting the heat, but by knowing exactly when to step from shadow into sun. On a windy afternoon along the edge of an Australian pasture, the landscape seems divided between order and wildness. To one side, rows of cut fields stretch in precise geometric planes, cropped to stubble by grazing stock or harvest. To the other, hedgerows and roadside verges erupt in ragged disorder, clumps of grasses, seed heads nodding, tangles of shrubs hiding burrows beneath. It is along this seam of cultivated field and rough margin that one of Australia's most delicate hunters takes its station. High above, wings trembling against the air, the Nankeen Kestrel holds itself still, suspended as though pinned to the sky by an invisible thread. To the human eye, this hovering seems almost miraculous. Other birds of prey circle or perch, relying on momentum or vantage, but the kestrel dares to stop mid-flight. With a wingspan scarcely more than 80 centimeters, it rides the shear of wind that curls upward over cliffs, road embankments, and the edges of open paddocks. Each wing beat is a fine adjustment, a negotiation with turbulence, while the tail spreads into a coppery fan to break forward drift. The kestrel's head remains astonishingly fixed in space, eyes locked downward while the rest of its body vibrates with constant motion. This stabilization, enabled by a rapid reflex arc between inner ear and neck muscles, allows the bird to separate its vision from the chaos of its own wing beats. In effect, it is a living tripod, the camera always steady, no matter how unsteady the frame. What the kestrel sees is not the world as we see it. Its eyes, finely adapted to daylight hunting, extend sensitivity into the ultraviolet spectrum. To us, a paddock is a patchwork of green and brown. To the kestrel, it is laced with glowing signatures invisible to mammal eyes. Rodents, as they move through grass, leave urine trails that reflect ultraviolet light. To the kestrel, these traces appear as luminous pathways, roadmaps of activity guiding it to the places where small mammals are most active. Combined with its hovering strategy, this sensory adaptation transforms an open field into a legible document of prey behavior. The mechanics of the hunt follow a rhythm as precise as the wind. The kestrel hovers until its gaze locks onto the slightest movement, the twitch of a mouse in stubble, the flick of a lizard across bare earth. Then, folding wings with sudden decisiveness, it drops. The fall is steep but controlled, an arrow guided by minor corrections of tail and wing until, just above the ground, the bird flares and strikes. The impact is swift, talons pinning the prey before it has time to react. Within seconds, the kestrel lifts again, a struggling mouse or grasshopper clasped beneath, carried to a perch where the work of consumption begins. Yet the significance of these strikes extends far beyond the fate of individual prey. Small mammals reproduce with explosive rapidity when unchecked, their populations capable of overwhelming pastures, undermining crops, and altering entire vegetation communities. The kestrel's role as regulator ensures that these booms are tempered. By focusing its hunting along edges, hedgerows, road verges, fence lines, it targets the very zones where rodent populations surge highest, where food and cover overlap most densely. In this way, the kestrel not only sustains itself, but enforces a balance at the margins of human agriculture. The kestrel's relationship with edges is no coincidence. Wind shear is strongest at transitions, where flat fields meet rising ground, where coastal cliffs meet sea, where road cuttings split open the land. These transitions create the updrafts and turbulence that give the bird its hovering platform. Without them, its hunting would be far more energetically costly, each hover demanding intense flapping. With them, the kestrel can ride air as though standing on an invisible hill, holding position for long minutes with only minor exertion. Thus, geography and aerodynamics conspire to shape the kestrel's ecology, binding its presence to the borders of terrain. Unlike larger raptors, the kestrel thrives not by brute strength, but by precision and versatility. Its diet is eclectic: mice and voles, insects and grasshoppers, small reptiles basking at field edges. In coastal regions, it will hover over cliffs to take skinks or beetles. Inland, it patrols fallow paddocks, sometimes snatching prey no larger than a locust. This flexibility allows kestrels to persist across a wide range of Australian habitats, from urban fringes to open grasslands, from pastoral zones to rugged coastlines. Where there is edge and wind, there can be kestrels. Their reproductive strategy mirrors this opportunism. Pairs establish territories in spring, often nesting in hollows, cliff ledges, or even abandoned buildings near open ground. Clutches of 3 to 5 eggs are incubated primarily by the female, while the male brings food. Once hatched, the chicks grow rapidly, demanding a steady stream of prey delivered to the nest. This period intensifies the kestrel's hunting pressure on local rodent and insect populations, creating a seasonal pulse of predation that coincides with the breeding peaks of many small mammals. The effect is not accidental, but ecological synchrony, predator and prey rhythms aligning to shape the dynamics of the field. Observation of kestrels reveals their subtle interplay with other raptors. Larger hawks and eagles dominate open skies, forcing kestrels to specialize in smaller prey and exploit wind-hovering niches inaccessible to heavier birds. In this way, competition is diffused by difference. The kestrel hunts where others cannot, at scales and methods that larger species ignore. The result is a layered aerial guild, each predator filling a distinct aerodynamic and ecological role, collectively maintaining balance across the landscape. Humans, too, find themselves woven into this balance. Farmers often regard kestrels with quiet gratitude, recognizing their contribution to controlling pest populations. Roadside villages, where kestrels are frequently seen hovering, double as both ecological corridors and human hazards, the birds occasionally colliding with vehicles during dives. Yet even in these unintended risks, the kestrel's presence signals a landscape still functioning, a reminder that wild systems persist even at the seams of human design. The kestrel's role as hoverline hunter is a striking example of how predators exploit physics as much as biology. Wind, light and terrain combine to create opportunities that the bird's anatomy and behavior are exquisitely tuned to exploit. Its head stabilization allows vision to remain steady in turbulence. Its ultraviolet perception reveals what mammal eyes cannot. Its wings and tail convert invisible air currents into platforms for stillness. These traits, each remarkable in isolation, interlock into a hunting strategy perfectly suited for the boundaries of open and closed terrain. To watch a kestrel is to watch tension suspended. The body flutters, yet the head remains locked. The air surges, yet the bird holds steady. Beneath, a mouse darts, unaware that its glowing trail has betrayed it. And then, with a fold of wings, the moment resolves into a plunge. Gravity reclaimed, silence broken, balance enforced. In ecological terms, the kestrel is not a ruler of vast territories like the crocodile, nor a shaper of trophic cascades as the dingo. Its scale is more modest, yet no less critical. By regulating small mammal numbers at the edges of human landscapes, it prevents local outbreaks that would ripple into larger problems. By scavenging insects and reptiles, it buffers ecosystems against imbalances. Its authority is not thunderous but precise, enforced quietly from the air at the seams of pasture and scrub, cliff and sea, road and verge. The air itself is the kestrel's ally, a border made visible only through its hovering form. Where wind rises, the kestrel rides. Where edges generate turbulence, it steadies itself into place. In this way, the bird embodies a simple rule of survival. To master the boundary, one must master the physics that define it. Hovering is not magic. It is the art of making invisible currents tangible, of holding still where nothing else can. The Nankeen Kestrel may be small, but in the geometry of edge habitats, it is sovereign. Its presence reminds us that the laws of ecology are written not only in tooth and claw, but also in light, wind and contrast. To stand at the edge of a field and see it poised above is to glimpse a hunter that has made the very border itself its weapon. And in every dive, every strike, every luminous trail followed to its end, the kestrel enforces the delicate line between abundance and collapse, a line drawn, quite literally, in the air. The creek is narrow, shaded by casuarinas and ghost gums, its surface a patchwork of light fractured through leaves. The current is unhurried in dry months, winding in a series of quiet bends where water pools into amber stillness before spilling shallowly over gravel riffles. Along these pools, the banks fold inward, undercut by years of floods, their faces armored with mats of tangled roots. To most eyes, these roots are little more than obstacles, black tendrils clutching soil against the tug of water. To one of the strangest animals on Earth, they are gateways, thresholds to a hidden world carved into darkness. At first glance, the platypus seems an unlikely architect of such realms. With its soft brown fur, broad tail and improbable duck-like bill, it carries the appearance of something stitched together from other creatures' spare parts. Yet behind this patchwork exterior lies a predator of extraordinary subtlety, one that reads its environment through senses few animals share. When it slides beneath the water, eyelids snap shut, ears seal tight, and nostrils close. Sight, hearing, and smell, the trinity upon which so many hunters depend, are abandoned. In their place, the platypus enters a world written in electricity. Every contraction of muscle, every flick of fin or insect wriggle generates faint electrical fields. Laced across the skin of the bill are tens of thousands of electroreceptors, exquisitely sensitive organs capable of detecting these signatures. In murky water where visibility collapses, the platypus navigates by this hidden language, sweeping its bill side to side across the bottom like a living antenna. Crayfish buried in silt, caddisfly larvae clinging to pebbles, insect nymphs drifting in eddies. Each reveals itself in pulses invisible to other senses. To watch the platypus forage is to see an animal inhabiting a parallel dimension, one stitched into the same creek, but perceived through an entirely different grammar. Its hunting technique is methodical. With a buoyant body and webbed forepaws folded forward, it sculls gently with hind feet and tail, controlling drift as it traces the bottom. Food is scooped into cheek pouches, not eaten immediately, but carried until the platypus surfaces to chew. Stones and grit are often gathered as well, used in place of teeth to grind prey into digestible fragments. The animal's very physiology reflects this duality, smooth build at the front, but with internal plates of keratin adapted for crushing. Evolution has crafted not a specialist in one food source, but a generalist able to exploit the complex invertebrate communities that bloom after rain pulses. Rain transforms the creek. What was once placid and clear becomes turbid, coursing with energy as storm water surges from uplands. For many creatures, floods are peril. For the platypus, they are opportunity. Fresh inflows flush insect larvae from side channels, concentrating them along the eddies of undercut banks. Tiny shrimps and worms are dislodged from sediment, drifting helplessly until intercepted by the electrosensitive sweep of a bill. At these moments, the creek becomes a banquet, and the platypus dives repeatedly, sometimes for hours, exploiting the bounty. Its metabolism, unusually high for a mammal of its size, demands constant intake. Where other semi-aquatic animals might rest for long stretches, the platypus is nearly always at work, each dive a calculation in the balance of survival. But feeding is only one half of its cipher. The other lies in the tunnels that vanish above the waterline. Platypus burrows are subtle, their entrances concealed among roots and overhangs, often just a dark hole at the creek's edge, easily overlooked. From there, tunnels may extend 10 meters or more into the bank, twisting upward to chambers insulated from floods. Ordinary resting burrows house solitary individuals, but breeding burrows, dug by females, are marvels of construction. These may reach 30 meters, with multiple plugs of earth packed along the tunnel to regulate humidity and protect against rising water. Within, the female creates a nest chamber lined with damp vegetation, shredded and carried in using her tail. Here, she incubates eggs, one of the few mammals to do so. The eggs themselves are leathery, reptile-like, a reminder of the platypus's deep evolutionary roots. After hatching, the young are tiny, blind, and helpless, nourished not through nipples but by milk secreted from specialized patches of skin. This milk pools in the mother's fur, where the young lap it directly. In this fusion of traits, reptilian eggs, mammalian milk, aquatic feeding, electroreceptive hunting, the platypus embodies an evolutionary riddle, a lineage that diverged dearly yet persisted by weaving together adaptations from multiple worlds. Predator-prey dynamics along the creek reinforce its elusive strategy. Raptors such as sea eagles and goshawks patrol overhead. Goannas and snakes probe banks. Foxes and feral cats linger at the edges. The platypus's best defense is disappearance. Its brown fur blends seamlessly with water's surface, while its preference for dawn and dusk activity reduces exposure. Should threat loom, it slips into its burrow, vanishing into tunnels invisible to most predators. Survival is not won through confrontation, but through concealment, through the maintenance of parallel worlds in which danger in one realm can be escaped by retreating into another. Even its physiology hints at a double life. The platypus has dense, waterproof fur that traps insulating air, allowing it to forage in cold water without succumbing to hypothermia. Its body temperature is lower than that of most mammals, around 32 degrees rather than 37 degrees, reflecting a balance between aquatic energy demands and terrestrial rest. Males carry a weapon little appreciated outside of science, a venomous spur on the hind leg capable of delivering excruciating pain. Unlike snakes, this venom is not primarily for prey capture, but for dominance contests during breeding season, when males grapple and slash in underwater duels. It is yet another signal that the platypus cannot be neatly categorized: predator, burrower, mammal, venom bearer, electrosensor, all folded into one. The broader ecological role of the platypus extends beyond its own survival. By preying heavily on aquatic invertebrates, it helps regulate populations that would otherwise explode after floods, maintaining balance in the food web. Its burrows, abandoned after use, become refuges for fish, insects, and even amphibians, linking aquatic and terrestrial communities. In this sense, the platypus functions as a stitch in the fabric of ecosystems, threading together bank and water, flood and drought, predator and prey. For humans, the platypus has long been both wonder and puzzle. When specimens were first sent to Europe in the 18th century, naturalists suspected fraud, convinced that the bill of a duck had been sewn onto the body of a mammal. Even today, its biology resists easy classification, reminding us that evolution is not a straight line, but a branching experiment, producing forms that can confound expectations yet thrive in niches few others could occupy. In an era when freshwater habitats are increasingly stressed by land clearing, pollution, and altered flows, the platypus also becomes an indicator. Its presence signaling healthy creeks, its absence a warning of imbalance. To sit quietly along a shaded pool and glimpse the ripple of a platypus surfacing is to witness a cipher in motion. For a moment, it seems ordinary. A small mammal rolling in the water, chewing its catch. But then it dives again, eyelids sealed, senses shifting into a hidden register, body slipping beneath roots to tunnels unseen. Above, the world continues with the chatter of birds and the rustle of leaves. Below, a different world persists, stitched seamlessly into the first, accessible only to those equipped with the right code. The platypus endures because it has mastered these parallel worlds. In water, it hunts through electricity. On land, it hides within tunnels invisible to most predators. Its burrows tether aquatic life to terrestrial safety. Its body straddles mammalian and reptilian traits. Its survival strategy is one of translation between realms. In every sense, it is a cipher written into the banks of Australian creeks, an enigma that, once deciphered, reveals a truth both simple and profound. Life does not conform to categories, but invents new ones where opportunity demands. In the shallows of a tropical lagoon, the reef is not always a riot of motion. There are stretches where the corals flatten into rubble beds and sand flats, where water shifts lazily with the tide, and the usual pageantry of reef life seems subdued. Yet even here, in quiet corners of the lagoon, a peculiar fortress thrives, a sea anemone, its crown of tentacles swaying like a field of living spears. Among those spears, flickering in bursts of orange and white, the clownfish makes its stand. To passers-by, it is a small creature, scarcely more than a palm's length, but in this confined territory it is both soldier and diplomat, enforcer of a boundary written not in stone or fence but in stings. The clownfish's existence hinges on an alliance that appears at first impossible. The anemone's tentacles are armed with nematocysts, microscopic harpoons charged with venom that can paralyze or kill small fish. To most reef dwellers, crossing that border is fatal. Yet the clownfish darts in and out with impunity, pausing among the tentacles as if lounging in a protected palace. Its secret lies in its skin, a mucus layer that masks its presence from the anemone's stings. This immunity is not absolute from birth. Young clownfish must acclimate, brushing tentacles carefully, gradually layering themselves with the anemone's own chemical cues until host and guest are indistinguishable to the anemone's senses. What appears effortless is in fact a learned ritual, an initiation into a fortress few others may enter. Within that fortress, the clownfish wields unusual power. Predators approaching the anemone hesitate at its threshold. A wrasse or damselfish scouting for an easy meal is suddenly faced with a decision. Enter the forest of stings and risk impalement, or veer away. For many, the risk is not worth the prize. The clownfish knows this well. It patrols the edges of its anemone like a border guard, darting forward to chase off intruders, then retreating instantly to the safety of its venomous host. Its defense is not brute strength, but the clever use of a weaponized home. Even larger predators, who could consume the clownfish outright, pause long enough for the tiny fish to vanish among the tentacles. In this borderland, hesitation is survival, but the relationship between clownfish and anemone is no one-sided exploitation. Each partner brings something essential to the other. The clownfish feeds and defecates among the tentacles, delivering nutrients in the form of nitrogen and phosphorus that the anemone absorbs. This fertilization boosts the anemone's growth, expanding its crown, strengthening its reach, and indirectly enlarging the clownfish's territory. In return, the anemone provides shelter that is unrivaled in its efficacy. Together they form a cooperative unit greater than the sum of its parts, each dependent on the other's vitality. Remove the fish, and the anemone grows more slowly. Remove the anemone, and the fish loses its fortress. The clownfish's behavior reveals a life lived in precise geometry. Unlike roving reef fish that patrol broad ranges, clownfish exist in a space scarcely larger than a single coral head. Their world is measured in centimeters, the radius of safety defined by tentacle margins. Yet within this small circle unfolds a remarkable drama of hierarchy and reproduction. Each anemone hosts a social group, dominated by a breeding female and her mate. Other individuals remain non-breeding subordinates, their growth suppressed by social cues and their roles confined to defense and maintenance. Should the female die, the male undergoes a sex change, becoming female in turn, while the next subordinate rises to breeding male. This strict hierarchy ensures continuity, but also illustrates the fluidity of identity in reef life, where even sex is a flexible role shaped by circumstance. Territorial expansion is linked directly to the health of the anemone. A robust, well-nourished anemone provides broader coverage, more tentacles among which the clownfish can weave. As the fish fertilize their host, they are in fact enlarging their own defensive perimeter, investing in a future where the boundaries of safety stretch a little wider. In degraded reefs where anemones shrink, the opposite occurs. The fish's world contracts, predation risk rises, and survival falters. Thus, the clownfish's fate is inseparable from the well-being of its stinging guardian, binding them together in ecological intimacy. The anemone fortress also shapes interactions beyond its immediate tenants. Other reef species adjust their behavior around it, recognizing the danger zone of tentacles. Herbivorous fish skirt the edge rather than grazing too close. Small invertebrates settle cautiously at its margins. Even larger reef predators learn to associate clownfish with frustration, their instinctive lunge often thwarted by venomous deterrents. In this way, the clownfish's presence alters the neighborhood itself, enforcing order not by aggression, but by leveraging the latent power of its host. The weaponized home casts a shadow of influence wider than its physical size, redefining traffic patterns across the reefscape. Clownfish do not spend their entire lives in passive defense. They forage actively, picking at algae and detritus around the anemone's base, nipping small invertebrates from the water column. Their dart and park movements, rapid and jerky, are a language of constant readiness, each sortie calibrated to minimize exposure beyond the protective zone. At times, they even lure potential prey closer to the tentacles, creating opportunities for both themselves and their host. Their movements, seemingly nervous, are in fact strategic, expressions of a life balanced on the edge of risk and safety. The ecological stakes of this partnership ripple outward. By regulating predator access, clownfish indirectly shape the composition of small reef fish communities. By fertilizing anemones, they enhance habitats that provide shelter not only for themselves, but for shrimps and crabs that also dwell among the tentacles. These secondary tenants, in turn, interact with other species, creating a network of influence radiating from a single fish-anemone alliance. The clownfish may be small, but its ecological reach is magnified by the fortress it commands. Climate change and reef degradation threaten to unravel this cipher. Anemones, like corals, host symbiotic algae that provide much of their energy. Stress from warming waters can cause bleaching, a loss of these algae, leaving the anemone weakened. Without healthy hosts, clownfish populations decline, and the intricate system of border defense collapses. What was once a stable partnership becomes fragile, its continuity dependent on forces far beyond the control of either partner. In this vulnerability lies a broader truth. The smallest actors of the reef are bound to the largest processes of planetary change. Yet for now, in the relative calm of an intact lagoon, the clownfish continues its patrol. Its bright stripes, often interpreted as signals of harmless whimsy, are in fact conspicuous markers that help maintain group cohesion among tentacles. Predators may see them too, but the stripes serve as reassurance within the colony, visual cues that reinforce social bonds as individuals dart and vanish among swaying arms. The reef may be noisy with color, But here, at the border of stings, clarity matters more than camouflage. To watch a clownfish is to witness a paradox of scale. Its territory is tiny, its body slight, its bite negligible. Yet its influence is immense, enforced not by its own strength, but by mastery of partnership. It does not need to be the strongest, fastest, or largest. It needs only to own the boundary where hesitation reigns. In this space, predators falter, neighbors adjust, and the rules of the reef bend around a fish that, by itself, could never impose them. The clownfish endures because it has learned the power of weaponized homes. By aligning with an anemone, it transforms vulnerability into dominance, fragility into resilience. Its story reminds us that survival is not always about leaving the shelter of borders, but sometimes about making those borders the very source of authority. In every Darton park, every patrol at the tentacle edge, the clownfish writes the same rule: own the boundary, and the neighborhood obeys. On a falling tide, the reef flattens into tide pools and channels, places where coral gives way to rubble and sand. These are transition zones, margins of broken shells, shattered coral heads, and fine silt stirred by waves. To the casual observer, the scene is a jumble of fragments, a mosaic of greys and browns indistinguishable from one another. Yet among this debris, a predator waits, indistinguishable not by chance but by design. The stonefish, Sinancia, has turned stillness into a weapon, becoming less an animal than an extension of the rubble itself, a mine laid into the border where reef breaks into sand. The stonefish is not graceful. Its body is squat, warty and rough, skin mottled into shades of brown, orange or grey that match coral rubble perfectly. Algae and encrusting organisms sometimes grow directly on its skin, adding further disguise. When it settles onto the bottom, partially covering itself with a thin veil of sand, it ceases to exist as a recognizable creature. Even seasoned divers may hover inches away without seeing it. In this camouflage lies both its defense and its offense. To be overlooked until overlooked prey strays too near. Its strike is the antithesis of its appearance. The stonefish may remain motionless for hours, conserving energy in a way only ambush predators can afford. Then, in less than 1/100th of a second, its mouth cavity expands, creating a vacuum that sucks in fish or shrimp too close to escape. The jaws close just as swiftly, leaving nothing but a puff of disturbed sediment. To the prey, there is no chase, no warning, only the sudden erasure of space between safety and death. The predator that seemed like rock reveals itself in a flash of motion, and then, just as quickly, returns to stillness. But the stonefish carries another adaptation that elevates it from predator to minefield. Along its dorsal surface are 13 stout spines connected to venom glands, pressure-triggered weapons designed not for hunting but for deterrence. A careless step from above, by a shark, a turtle, or a human foot, drives these spines upward, injecting venom that causes excruciating pain, tissue damage, even systemic collapse. Unlike many venomous creatures, the stonefish cannot withdraw or threaten. Its weapon is passive, always armed, triggered by intrusion. It is the ultimate defensive strategy for an animal that spends its life unmoving on the seafloor. For humans, this adaptation has become infamous. Coastal communities across northern Australia know the danger well. A stonefish hidden among rubble is almost invisible until it is too late. This is why the stonefish shuffle is advised when wading in shallow waters, sliding feet forward rather than stepping down, stirring the substrate and encouraging hidden creatures to move. By shuffling, one avoids placing direct weight on the fish, a tactic not born from superstition, but from intimate knowledge of the minefield beneath the tide. The ecological role of this venom is not centered on people, but on the stonefish's place in the reef. Its toxicity deters larger predators, ensuring its survival in a habitat where many ambush fish would otherwise be vulnerable once discovered. Sharks, rays, and larger predatory fish patrol the same rubble lines, but few risk the gamble of biting a stonefish. In this immunity from predation, the stonefish can afford to sit openly in high-traffic zones, relying on stillness rather than escape. Its venom allows it to choose territory strategically, inhabiting the very borders where prey density is highest, the interfaces of sand and rubble where small fish shuttle nervously. Tide and turbidity add another layer of advantage. As waves collapse over shallow rubble, sediment lifts and swirls, clouding visibility. Prey fish navigating through this haze lose the clarity of sight they depend upon, blundering closer to the bottom as they seek shelter among rocks. The stonefish, being motionless and indistinguishable from the substrate, is hidden doubly, by mimicry and by water itself. In these moments, the rubble field transforms into a true minefield, where each step or flick of fin carries risk of sudden detonation. Like many reef creatures, the stonefish's life cycles are bound to the pulse of tide and season. It is most active during the slack periods of dawn and dusk, when small fish move between reef and sand. Its reproduction, though less studied than its hunting, reveals a surprising vulnerability. Eggs are laid openly on the seafloor, fertilized externally, left unguarded to drift with currents until larvae hatch. For a creature armored so effectively as an adult, its early life is fragile, dependent on sheer numbers rather than parental defense. Only a small fraction survive to settle, and those that do must rapidly learn the art of stillness if they are to avoid becoming prey themselves. Thermoregulation in the intertidal rubble zone is another challenge. Tide pools heat quickly in the sun, their oxygen dropping as temperature rises. The stonefish tolerates these fluctuations better than many reef fish, capable of withstanding low oxygen conditions for hours. It does this through metabolic depression, slowing its energy use to match environmental stress. In this way, it can persist in tide pools inhospitable to most others, further reinforcing its role as a predator of edges, occupying spaces where the rules are harsh but the opportunities abundant. The presence of stonefish influences prey behavior subtly but profoundly. Small reef fish foraging along rubble learn to dart rather than linger, their movements jittery, quick, as if expecting sudden death from below. In this heightened vigilance, feeding efficiency is reduced, altering how algae and small invertebrates are grazed. In effect, the stonefish's camouflage projects fear beyond its immediate strikes, shaping the rhythm of life in rubble fields. Even when unseen, its possibility regulates behavior, a silent governance enforced by the ever-present threat of venom and ambush. From an evolutionary perspective, the stonefish is a paradox. Its body is not sleek or agile, its metabolism is low, its reproduction risky, yet it thrives, precisely because it has mastered the art of being the environment itself. In ecosystems dominated by motion and color, it survives by opting out, choosing invisibility over display, patience over pursuit. Its venom is not about aggression but insurance, a guarantee that its immobility will not lead to vulnerability. Across millions of years, this strategy has proved as effective as speed or strength, making the stonefish one of the most enduring ambush predators of the Indo-Pacific. For divers and naturalists, To find a stonefish is both exhilarating and sobering. Exhilarating because it reveals the extraordinary ingenuity of camouflage, the kind that turns rock into predator with no visible seam. Sobering because it reminds us how fragile our own bodies are against the defenses of creatures perfectly at home in their world. What is to us an accident, a misplaced step, a brushed hand, is to the stonefish simply the continuation of its rule. Invade the boundary of stillness, and the border answers back. To stand on a reef flat at low tide, watching the waves retreat and rubble glisten in the sun, is to step unknowingly into a minefield maintained by one of the ocean's strangest enforcers. The stonefish does not move, does not chase, does not announce itself. It waits, it blends, it trusts that in time, prey or threat will come to it. And when they do, the rules are absolute. Prey vanish in a blink, predators withdraw in pain, and humans learn to shuffle rather than stride. In the calculus of the rubble line, stillness wins. The stonefish endures because it has become indistinguishable from the very habitat it rules, because its body is both weapon and disguise, because its minefield is written into the debris itself. Here, at the border between sand and stone, life is negotiated not in speed or spectacle, but in silence, patience, and the sudden, devastating revelation that the landscape itself is alive.